From KGW News, this is Straight Talk with Laurel Porter.
Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Laurel Porter. A lot has changed during this pandemic, including how students are attending college this fall. In this episode of Straight Talk, we talked to PSU President Stephen Persy about Oregon's largest urban university and how the pandemic will affect its students, the larger community, and whether students are safe on campus in the heart of downtown Portland.
He reminds us why we're all doing this work at Portland State.
Stephen Persy was named interim president in May of 2019, following the resignation of former president Ramat Qureshi. This past June, PSU's Board of Trustees unanimously named Persy the school's 10th president. The committee said his work guiding PSU's transition to a virtual campus in such a short time period is the latest example of his effectiveness and dedication leading this campus. Persy has difficult challenges ahead, including decreasing enrollment and adapting to the coronavirus pandemic, which are straining the university's revenue and budget. Also last month, the university decided starting this fall, its campus police officers would begin patrolling without firearms. PSU has been under pressure to disarm campus police after 2 officers shot and killed Jason Washington, a black man, 2 years ago. Persy has said it's time to rethink the school's whole public safety approach. And here to tell us about his plans for PSU, welcome to my guest, the 10th president of Portland State University, Stephen Persy. Welcome back to Straight Talk. It's nice to have you here.
So delighted to be here and join you today.
Well, the last time you were on Straight Talk, almost exactly a year ago today, you were interim president. How are you feeling as you prepare to begin the fall semester in just a couple of weeks as the official president of PSU?
Well, I'm very optimistic, and I think we're going to be off to a good fall term, but it's certainly going to be different than any fall term we've had before. If I go back now to March of this year, which sometimes seems years ago, but it's only a few months ago, our campus, like so many across the country, had to adjust and adapt to the COVID virus pandemic. In very short notice, our faculty went moved all of our in-person classes to remote format. The staff that support our students through a variety of services also went remote, and we took our research operations and closed down and kept only remote, which could be safely done. So we really transformed to a whole different remote environment, and that was new for us. And I can't thank the faculty for their great work, the staff, the student support staff, and all the students who adapted along with us in this period of remote learning. It was messy sometimes, it was a challenge, but in the end we got through a very strong spring term. And our summer term has gone quite well, and now we look forward to a fall term, and we're going to be excited to move forward. It's going to be different, but we're going to keep student learning as our top priority.
President Persy, what's open this fall at PSU that wasn't open spring term because of COVID?
Well, some of the things have always been opened. Our dorms stayed open throughout. There are some students, including international students, who don't have a place to stay, so we kept our dorms open all the time. We anticipate about 800 or 900 students in our dorms in the fall. Now that's going to be short of our 2,000 or so beds, but we will be providing student housing. We have our recreation center will be open, our library will be open, our child care center is intending to be open. And one of the things we learned is that students often need space to study. We have always kept our computer labs open for those who might need computer equipment and software to be able to do their work. But other students told us we just need a place during the day or sometimes in the early evening to do our own work. I have a great place to stay and live, but it's not quiet and it's not conducive to learning and studying. And so we've created a lot more study spaces on campus where people will be able to come to campus and have a quiet place to connect to the internet and do their schoolwork and be effective students throughout that. So many elements of our campus will be open, despite the fact that most of our instruction and most of our student services work will be remote for the fall term.
How have you been preparing teachers for how to instruct their students effectively with this distant learning environment?
Thank you. You know, I would like to point out that about 25% of our classes have been offered online for several years now. So online learning is not totally unique to us. And so we've had that experience. But as you're saying, many of our faculty who have been teaching in in-person classrooms had to move to remote. This summer, we had over 400 faculty participate in a learning work with our Office of Academic Innovation to tune up and advance their own skills in remote instruction. That work, along with the experience in actually doing that instruction in the spring and summer terms, have really helped our faculty strengthen those skills to offer quality remote instruction in this fall term.
Do you think the students will be getting the same level of education with remote learning? Are they getting their money's worth?
I think they're definitely getting their money's worth because we're just putting the same amount of resources and energy into the work, even if we deploy those resources somewhat differently. We have made sure that our resources are available for students who don't have computers. We have a loaner program where we give students, any student who does not have access to the internet by their own equipment, we give them a laptop and a hotspot to allow them to connect to that. I think it's going to be a different kind of learning. I think it's requiring us to have skills that in instruction that we've modified, and even our students, we're having some instruction how students can be effective remote learners. So I'm sure we're going to have effective learning this fall term, even as we're adapting to the pandemic and the ways that we deliver our teaching.
What's your best guess as when you might be able to offer more in-person classes? And when you do you think even as PSU returns to those in-person classes, some of these remote learning techniques will change how you approach education in the future?
That's like the $24,000 question to every single president in the United States, and every other university is trying to figure that out. My best guess is that we probably will never come back fully remote for a bit, but we will probably go to some sort of hybrid format where we have more in person and keeping some remote as well, in addition to our online learning. So I think we'll probably go through a period of hybrid, that is some remote and some in-class instruction for a period until we go back to a larger in-person enrollment. But you ask a really good question. I think we're going to learn from this, and I think there's no such thing as going back to the old normal. I think we're going to be creating a new normal. I think we have realized that remote instruction and remote access to student services sometimes meets the needs of our very busy students who are working. Many are raising families and working and studying at the same time. So we think that our approach to the remote learning is teaching us things about how to provide the greatest access to students, making sure that those who need some in-person services will be able to obtain them, but perhaps doing more remote work to increase the access of our students to the teaching and the student services and other things that they may need to be effective learners.
You mentioned you have 800 or 900 students living on campus. Have students and parents of students expressed concerns, fears, not just about coronavirus, but about the unrest, all the protests they might have seen on the news downtown? And what are you telling them about that?
Well, the people that live locally and the people in our dorms, I think, are feeling safe. They know that our campus has had no problems of protest, and it continues to be a safe place, and the places that they used to going to and visiting they're still open. I think the question of the protests that have received such national attention will be a challenge in terms of recruiting new students, and as they and their parents are trying to understand what the protests really mean in terms of living in Portland. But we want to assure them that our campus is safe. We're going to continue our operations still remotely, but we'll still have things open as we otherwise would plan, and that we have a great place for people to come and learn.
Well, PSU is rethinking campus safety. You're right in the middle of that. Last month, you made the decision that campus police will no longer carry guns. When you were here last year, I asked you about disarming campus police after the shooting death of Jason Washington. And at that point, campus police were still carrying guns. And here's what you said then.
Well, there are certain things that armed police can do that other people can't, other officers can't. So, for example, if there's a domestic disturbance and we believe there's a weapon involved, we cannot send an unarmed person there because it's unfair to their safety. So there are certain things that sworn officers are able to do that non-sworn officers are not able to do. We've looked at other alternatives in the area and have not found any other law enforcement agencies that want to take on that role.
A lot has happened in the last year. Help us understand, President Percy, your change in thinking and why you've decided to disarm campus police.
Well, let me go back to about a year ago when I was here. I was the interim president coming into a situation where campus public safety was on the minds of many people on our campus. There have been protests and there have been concerns, and I'm sure your viewers are aware of some of that. At the time last fall, the board and I came up with a plan we called Safer Together, which was beginning to emphasize the extension of campus public safety beyond just sworn officers, but to everybody on campus. We expanded the number of our unarmed campus public safety support staff. And we actually, for the first time, had students become student safety ambassadors and be on campus. And at the end of that report in October of last year, we said, after 3 years, we should go back and review this thoroughly. Well, I'll be honest with you, the things that have happened since that time, the tragedy of Jason Washington is still in our minds, the national unrest, the national calls for reforming law enforcement, the national calls for ensuring that Black Lives Matter and that we're treating everyone safely and equitably, led us to begin to, again, rethink more rapidly than we had planned to our campus public safety. And I really want to call out the fact that the decision for our campus public safety police officers not to carry weapons was a decision that they made, the officers made. I discussed that with them, it's other members of our leadership team, but that was the actual work of the campus public safety team that thought through this issue very carefully, looked at the number of occasions when they needed to have their weapons, and they want to be part of the solution. They want to rethink public safety, and so they decided on their own that they would patrol without arms. And I want to give them the full credit for taking that decision, which I think fits very nicely into the decision that the Board of Trustees of Portland State and myself made, that we want to rethink campus public safety. We want to look at all dimensions. We want to look at how can we safely help people who come to our campus or are experiencing emotional difficulty or some sort of drug problem. We want to figure out how we can help those people, and a law enforcement response may not be the best way to do that. In fact, we think there's other ways to do that. And we want to fully understand the safety concerns of all of our campus. So we're really doing a thorough review that will look at not only the question of arms, but also the broader questions of safety in an urban environment in these days of change in our community.
And let's talk about the campus police, and let's hear from them. There's an interview with the director of campus public safety, Willie Halliburton, who's been a police officer for 32 years. He's been at PSU for 5 years, and he spoke about the change you're talking about in campus policing. Let's listen.
I've examined my own experience dealing with police as a civilian, and I must tell you, things must change. And here at Portland State, I am so proud to be a part of this historic, groundbreaking way of doing police work. Portland State University officers will patrol the campus unarmed. We will carry non-lethal tasers. If there's a call that requires an armed presence, Portland Police Bureau has agreed to assist us. This is unique for Portland State University. I am not asking other departments to follow our lead. All I know is that at Portland State University, we need to heal, and this is the first step of healing.
And he called what you, the campus, and campus officers are doing as being pioneers in law enforcement. Is that how you see it?
In many ways, yes. I think we're trying to re-envision law enforcement in campus safety, much like other campuses and other communities in our country are doing. We're trying to look at new approaches. We're trying to figure out if different types of personnel are involved, and if safety can be delivered in other ways, through disarming, through de-escalation, through finding other ways of supporting situations before they actually become very serious. And so we're very, very interested in trying to create an evolution that will create a stronger campus public safety system, and a new one that will be less reliant on armed weapons and more reliant on a work of a community trying to stay safe together.
And campus safety is just one part of your focus on racial justice at PSU. As you reflect on addressing racial inequity, what personal reflections have you had about that?
I think that the recent protests and the other protests and discussions and incidents across our country have given us all pause to think much more deeply about our commitment to anti-racism, to Black Lives Matter, and to recognizing the harm that's been done to Indigenous people. I think we all realize that while we may have done some things in the forward direction, we really need to be doing more. And so myself and my campus leadership team, we're all very much committed to working together, and with our new Vice President for Global Diversity and Inclusion, to strike out in new ways and in bold ways to work against structural racism. And by that I mean there may be policies and procedures and practices that we've had in place for a long time that may continue to marginalize people unintentionally. We need to be very thoughtful. We need to look at our policies, our programs. We need to be sure that they are promoting equity and justice for everyone. We need to make sure that we have a campus culture and a campus community which does not tolerate racism and which is welcoming to all peoples from all backgrounds and all communities, so that we can be a really highly effective institute of higher education.
PSU has the most diverse student body in Oregon, and you mentioned you've hired a new vice president of global diversity and inclusion. Her name is Dr. Amay Lambert. What will her role be at PSU exactly?
Well, I'm very excited to see a greater role for our global diversity and inclusion unit in helping be a catalyst, an innovator, a challenger, an idea thought place to help us think through the many different ways that we can tackle racism and that we can create justice and equity in our campus and for our students and our faculty and staff. I have to always emphasize, however, that the work of working against racism and creating a more just institution is a responsibility of everyone on our campus. It's not something you delegate to someone in the field of diversity, equity, inclusion. They can be a leader, again, as I've said, a catalyst, but it's up to all of us to think through ourselves, to be aware of implicit bias, to do the most we can to use an equity lens, to look at what we do, how we make decisions, how we do planning, and how we evaluate ourselves with the attention to what we're doing to promote equity and fight racism in our campus. That's very important.
And she's also holding a campus-wide summit on racial equity on October 30th, so folks should be looking forward to that. President Percy, it's time for us to take a break. When we come back, we'll look at how the pandemic is affecting PSU's budget and how the university and Portland could partner to help revitalize the city's future. We're back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to Straight Talk. I'm Laurel Porter, and we're talking with the president of Portland State University. Like all of us facing unprecedented times, how will the pandemic help shape PSU's future? Welcome once again to my guest, PSU President Stephen Percy. Welcome back. Once again, it's great to have you here, President Percy. How is the pandemic infecting enrollment? How much of a decrease are you seeing in enrollment?
Well, that's a very interesting question. We were anticipating a slight dip in enrollment prior to the COVID pandemic because the number of students graduating high school is actually decreasing in a demographic trend. So we'd expected some decrease. We were very concerned in the spring term that we would lose a lot of students because of the turmoil and disruption caused by the pandemic. I'm very pleased to say that enrollment stayed almost perfectly steady and that the students were able to continue their learning in the spring term. In the summer term, we actually had a boost in enrollment, which we're very pleased about. Students able to continue their learning during the summer. During the fall, it's been a very volatile season to tell that because many students are waiting to the last minute to make their decisions. Even issues like the fires we're facing today are causing disruption and may affect the students' ability to come back to class. So far, we are a bit below where we thought we would be, but not substantially below that. But we're doing everything we can to empower students to stay involved and stay in their learning pathway to be successful and graduate from college. So we're down a little bit, but we have still about 3 weeks until the term starts, and we're still enrolling students, so we'll know better in about a month.
So how is that affecting PSU's budget?
Wow, if you think you lay awake at night about a question as the president, that's probably the biggest one, to tell you the truth, over the last few months. When the enrollment held pretty firm in the spring and the summer terms, that was good news for us. So we did not take a budget hit on that. But we did take a budget hit in the parts of the universities that are more like a business operation. That is our dorms, our parking structures, some of our student recreation center, other places that generate revenues that actually we did not operate. And I want you to know that when the spring term came and we asked students that wanted to leave the dorms to suggest that they do so if they had a safe place to go, we amended their contracts and didn't charge them for that. So there is a tremendous financial hit in our dorms, in our parking services, and a variety of other areas. The stimulus bill prior to the one that's under consideration by Congress right now provided a substantial amount of funding to universities. For Portland State, that meant about $8.5 million that went directly as a pass-through to our students to support their education and the cost of their learning. And the other 8.5% was designated to be used by universities to counteract the negative budgetary impact of the pandemic. And so those federal funds helped us ameliorate a lot of the budget losses we had, but not all of them. And so moving forward, the biggest question we had was, what's fall term enrollment going to be? If there's a huge hit there, there's a huge hit in our budget. We see some hit, but not a lot on that. We're very pleased the state of Oregon's legislature in their special session held university higher education across the state harmless. So we did not get a budget cut from the state in this current year, which is the second year of the biennium. So that was very helpful. So moving forward, our biggest challenge will be the impact of state funding. And we're waiting to see in the next biennium the amount of funding that the state will be able to make available to higher education. As the state experiences a major financial hit as a result of lower tax collections. And so our biggest worry and challenge right now is the next biennium and the impact on our funding from the state, which may be reeling at that time from reduced revenues to support higher education and other K-12 education and other parts of state government.
Well, I know a lot of students and parents will be wondering if that's going to mean another tuition increase. What do you think?
At this point, I have nothing to say about tuition increases, so we have not even thought about that. We're still trying to understand the position we're in. But do let me say that both the Board of Trustees and myself realize that tuition increases are a burden on our students. That the tuition level now, while still relatively moderate by the standards of private universities and many other publics, is still a burden people have to pay. And it's still something that affects their ability to attend college and be successful. And we know many of our students come from backgrounds where there's not a lot of wealth to support their education from their parents or their families. So we're doing everything we can to hold our costs down and to hold tuition down. But at this point, we have not got anywhere near thinking about our planning for the next budget year. So I can't really say very much right now, except that we know we want to do our best to keep it as low as possible.
We just have a couple of minutes left, but I did want to ask you, because Portland State has a long history of partnering with the city on many projects, like the city's sustainability office. And the city's reputation has really taken a beating after all the national and world headlines about the protests and civil unrest here. Do you envision PSU working with Portland to try to rebuild the economy and its reputation?
We really want to be part of that. You probably know that our motto is let knowledge serve the city. In a more realistic, contemporary version of that, it's let the city and the university create knowledge together, and that's very much part of what we're about. So we love Portland. Downtown Portland is our home. We feel we're right in the heart of it. We care so much about it. We would like to be able to do a variety of different things. We're trying to show people now across the country and prospective students that our campus is safe and that we're right here in the downtown part of it. We want to be working with city government or any local governments as they try to figure out how we deal with combating racism and promoting more justice. And we'd like to be part of any kind of solutions that are out there and provide a forum for people to think about creating solutions to creating and re-energizing the vitality of our downtown, the vitality of our city, and our public visibility in the state and the nation. So we want to be a partner. We want to be involved. We're doing our best to keep our university going strong, but we want to be a partner with business associations, with city government, with nonprofits to help Portland restore its high appreciation across the country and to make this continue to be the strong and vital community and region that it is.
We have just about a minute left, but I did want to give you the opportunity to have a final thought that you might want to share with the community as a whole.
Portland State would love to be in partnership with all kinds of organizations, informal and formal, city governments, nonprofits, to work on the anti-racism problem. The state of Oregon's history on this issue, as you know, is quite poor. And we want to be part of the solution. And so we don't have all the answers. We're learning, we're trying, we're going to do experimenting, we're going to commit resources to anti-racism and dealing with understanding the harm caused Indigenous people and learning from their values and their traditions and their customs. We want to continue to make Portland the most vital place it can be. And this area of racial justice is so important. Black lives matter, all lives matters. We need to be out there working and we need to be creative. And there's a lot of spirit and energy and excitement about this issue in Portland. And we just want to be part of that, and we will be part of that. And we'd like to work with other partners who'd like to work with us in making this commitment to anti-racism such an important part of our community.
President Percy from PSU, thank you for joining us here on Straight Talk. And we thank you for watching and listening. Remember, you can listen to us when it's convenient for you on our podcast. Get it wherever you get your podcasts. Search for KGW Straight Talk. We'll see you next week for Straight Talk. Stay safe.